I'd just returned from a 3-week business trip to Seattle, where I'd been finalizing a deal that could secure my company for the next 5 years. The entire flight home, all I could think about was getting back to the ranch, my grandfather's legacy, passed down through 3 generations of the Morrison family. But as I pulled up to the property, my heart dropped. A bright orange "Sold" sign was slapped across our wrought iron gate. I slammed on the brakes so hard the rental car's tires squealed. In my driveway was a moving truck, and 2 men were hauling boxes toward my front porch while a woman stood nearby directing them with a clipboard. I jumped out, furious. "Excuse me, what are you doing on my property?" I shouted, barely keeping my temper in check. The woman turned. "Oh, you must be the previous owner. I'm Sandra Hutchinson. We bought this property yesterday through an HOA auction. Got it for just $25,000. Incredible deal, right?" My stomach flipped. "Auction? HOA? This ranch has been in my family for 70 years. There is no HOA here." Sandra's face paled. "But the Riverside Estates HOA said the property was delinquent. They had all the paperwork, the lien, the notices." And that's when I realized. Karen Henderson. She was the president of Riverside Estates, a suburban development that bordered the far east side of our ranch. But our property wasn't part of that community. It was a mile away and zoned agricultural. My grandfather made sure of that back in the 80s when developers were circling. He had purchased the land in 1954 with his savings from the Korean War. He built everything himself, transitioned from cattle to horses, and left it to me when he passed 5 years ago. There were no debts, no liens. Property taxes were paid through a dedicated account. Everything was in order, or so I thought. Karen had a reputation. Friends in the subdivision said she issued citations for grass an inch too tall or the wrong paint color on a mailbox. She ran that HOA like a kingdom, and now she wanted my land. 6 months earlier, I'd received a letter. "Dear homeowner, following a boundary expansion vote, your property now falls within our jurisdiction. Please find enclosed your retroactive dues invoice, $3,600. I laughed and tossed it. This had to be a mistake. Our land had never been part of an HOA. Then more letters came. Fines for a fence that was too tall. Complaints about livestock noise. Every one went straight into the trash. Then came the certified mail. I refused them. I figured Karen would just give up. That was my first mistake. What I didn't know was that Karen was busy fabricating a paper trail. She filed documents with the county showing I'd been notified and had ignored everything. She even forged my signature on certified mail receipts. While I was in Seattle, she held a sham auction. No legal notice, no postings, nothing. Her HOA board approved it, and her brother-in-law's real estate firm, LIEN Holdings, purchased the property for $25,000. That was less than the value of the horses in our stable. Sandra and her husband were just as blindsided. They thought they'd scored a deal on distressed property. Instead, they'd been duped. I called my lawyer, David Brennan. "Get to the ranch now. Someone's trying to steal my land." Within an hour, David and a sheriff's deputy were on site. I convinced Sandra to pause the move-in while we sorted things out. She was starting to realize she'd been scammed. Over the next 3 hours, we uncovered everything. The documents were blatant fakes, signatures forged, meeting minutes fabricated, the lien filed using bogus HOA paperwork. Karen thought I wouldn't fight back, but she underestimated me. The notary seal on some of the documents belonged to someone who died 2 years ago. The HOA charter clearly showed its boundaries stopped a mile from our land. And LIEN Holdings? Registered to Karen's brother-in-law. She was listed as a secondary member. The sheriff opened a criminal investigation. That night, David secured an emergency court injunction, and Sandra and her husband agreed to cooperate and just wanted their $25,000 back. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. David's team uncovered everything. This wasn't Karen's first attempt. She'd tried to annex 2 other properties. She also had been embezzling from the HOA, using dues and fines to fund her land grab campaign. Residents of Riverside Estates had no idea their money was being used this way. The fraud was deep. Fake notices, photoshopped images, forged emails.
The FBI got involved once interstate wire fraud was confirmed. She used online banking to move the money. 3 months later, we were in court. The courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the defendant's table, no longer smug, but broken. The prosecution was thorough. 32 counts of fraud, 18 of forgery, conspiracy, embezzlement. The audience gasped as forged HOA documents were shown. Many residents saw their own signatures on fake meeting notes. I testified that I never agreed to join an HOA, and I'd never been legally notified. David presented airtight evidence. Karen's defense claimed she thought she was acting legally. That crumbled fast when emails surfaced between her and her brother-in-law discussing how they'd split profits. One even joked I was too dumb to notice. The judge delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts. The sale was voided. LIEN Holdings had to refund Sandra. Karen was ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution. Then came criminal sentencing. 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy. 3 years for embezzlement. A lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board or fiduciary role. Karen's face drained of color as the sentence was read. "Your Honor, I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." The judge stared her down. "Mrs. Henderson, you abused your power, forged documents, and tried to steal a family's legacy. 8 years is generous." The gavel struck. Karen wailed as marshals led her away. She turned back and screamed at me, "This is your fault! If you just paid the dues, none of this would have ever happened." But justice had been served. My grandfather's ranch remained in our family name, right where it belonged.